What is going on, everybody? My name is Jon Reyes. I've got one of my oldest buddies here by the name of Bardia. Wait, do you have a different name now?
We go by Bardia
Yeah,
Rez.
Bardia Rez. Okay, I won't say your real name because everyone's gonna laugh at you. But Bardia Rez is actually one of my previous business partners, and we've worked together for a very long time. And one of the most impressive things that I've seen Bardia do over the last few years is actually build himself an amazing personal brand, and he's been helping so many people on a completely different level. And I've been inspired. I've been so inspired by you, but by what you've built, what you've created, how many people you've affected. And the reason why is because I am your audience. We'll talk about who that audience is and what Bardia has basically come here to serve on this planet. But today we're going to talk about some really interesting stuff. We're going to be going over sobriety. We're going to go over personal development, maybe a little spirituality, maybe a little dick jokes. I don't know, but we'll throw it all in there. Bardia, why don't you introduce yourself to the world and what you're here for, man? What are you doing?
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate you reaching out to me, John, and it's great to reconnect. This is our first time, actually. I guess for those of you guys who don't know, I mean, we've got a whole backstory, but this is our first time reconnecting in, I don't know, maybe 2-3 years. So it's great to see you, man.
Likewise, bro.
Um, but yeah, I'm live on my TikTok right now. So quickly, for those of you guys watching me, I've got 90 people here watching my live on TikTok. I'm doing a podcast with a good friend of mine. And yeah, there's no real specific agenda. We're just kind of catching up, and we're going to talk about all things life, sobriety, personal growth, mindset, and kind of everything in between. So if you guys want to hang out on my live, I probably won't see your comments or be able to respond because I'll be engaged here on the Zoom. But yeah, man, um, dude, it's been a
Well,
wild journey since we last chatted. COVID happened, and that was crazy. But I guess to take things back, alcohol's always been a big part of my life. It was always something I really, really struggled with. And looking back, it was kind of something that kind of brought us together. We were party animals back then. And when COVID hit, my drinking got real bad. I was kind of like a weekend binge drinker. Like, I think when we were hanging out, I wasn't really drinking every day. I mean, we had a little party phase there where things kind of got crazy, but it was mostly a weekend thing. But then COVID hits, you're at home, state of the world is in distress and disarray, and you're like, fuck it, like no accountability, you're bored, you start drinking. And so volume started to increase rapidly. And I got up to drinking huge volumes of alcohol every day, like 4 to 6 bottles of wine a day at my worst. And kind of hit a rock bottom. And I was 29 at the time, a few months away from turning 30. And really, like, in that moment, the pain was so great. I like mangled my left shoulder. I dislocated it. It was like just the most excruciating pain of my life. And I was a few months away from turning 30 and just really went into some deep self-reflection and realized, like, I'm not the person I knew I was capable of being. I wasn't tapping my potential. I was a universe away from the person I thought I would be at 30 years old. And yeah, in that moment, I made what seemed like the hardest decision of my life, and that was to quit drinking alcohol. Shortly after, moved out to Austin, Texas, started working with a coach, became a coach, coached a bunch of people, immersed myself in the industry. 2020 to 2021 was like one of the most transformational years of my life, around really expanding my map of reality, better understanding the human operating system, healing my trauma, learning how to regulate my nervous system, tapping deeper into my spiritual connection, stepping up as a leader, improving my communication. Just so many different things happened. And yeah. And then
wow.
worked with them for like a year or so, and then left. A few months later, started the Stop Drinking Coach, and it's been great, man. It's really taken off. My content's reached, over 40 million people on TikTok, and I've helped almost 100 people quit drinking alcohol. And yeah, the ripple effect and just the transformation and the dent I'm making in the sobriety space, I think is just crazy. I wouldn't have imagined it 2.5 years ago when I was at my lowest.
Yeah, I can imagine, man. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's like such a wild journey. And I've known you, I met you during that time at your peak party phase. We both were in that party phase. We're both very addictive personalities. We would egg each other on. We would drink till the sunrise to sundown, throw in a little bit of, yayo in there. It just kept going. It didn't stop. And we didn't have really like a boundary. I remember those days, just, waking up the next day, just feeling like trash. Just waking. I remember using every ounce of energy in that night, partying, going hard, and having nothing left for like an entire week. And I lived that cycle for so long, But I know you kind of went through your own battles after we had stopped working together, and you kind of came to your own realizations and epiphanies for yourself, which, I didn't get to witness because I was working on myself as well. And so, when I started hearing things about you from other people, oh, have you seen how Bardia is doing? He's a completely changed man. He's doing this and that. And I was like, part of me was like, really? You know what I mean? Like that Bardia? I was like, no offense or anything, because I still had those elements within me as well. So it was almost like I was judging because I hadn't faced it myself yet, And so, your success and your ability to like tap into that and be truthful, for me, I hadn't admitted it to myself yet. And I think this was actually quite recently in terms of coming to terms with my addictions. I last year it was more like I had drank periodically, but there was still that bug inside of me that it was like, oh man, like I'm gonna go back to those days and it's gonna be exactly the same. And then I had this moment where it was Miami last year, and so it's been over 200 plus days. I've been like fully sober, and I've gone like an entire like 6 months to a year sober before, but like that was the end point for me when I realized like all of this that I'm doing right now is not nearly as enjoyable as having stability and a family and something to come home to that is consistent, that is loving. It's like all this like intermittent, or like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like you have this short burst of dopamine and then it's gone. And then you're back to like having nothing again. And I'm like, bro, I cannot live this kind of life. And that was rough. So yeah, tell me about kind of, I guess I'm interested to know what some of your traumas were that you kind of had to face for yourself. I don't know if you talk about this on your platform about your past and perhaps your dad or anything, but do you feel comfortable bringing any of that up?
Yeah, for sure, man. So, I mean, the whole alcohol deal, in my relationship to it, I think goes all the way back to my childhood. It goes back to when I was born, because from as far as I can remember, my dad was an alcoholic and was drinking literally every single day. The only time I knew him sober was Saturday mornings. He'd take me to get my haircut once a month, and that was like really special. But he was always drinking, and he was like the leader of, my household. And so he kind of like set the tone for everything, right? So because of that, his inability to regulate and handle himself, and he had this problem, obviously it was deeply rooted in his own trauma and his own pain, right? Like he put that into my family. And so that created a lot of family dysfunction. So there wasn't like there was no like emotional safety. There was a lot of like yelling and arguing and fighting and all that stuff going on. And my parents did their best, and I've accepted that, and I appreciate them, and I love them for it. But just like it wasn't the ideal scenario and situation for a child to be raised, right? Emotional support, learning how to regulate yourself, like deep emotional connection. There was a language barrier. I kind of my main language was English. My parents spoke Farsi, and so like I spoke Farsi too. I was fluent, but I couldn't truly communicate in the way that I could in English. So it's like there was never and even to this day, like there's not like a deep communicative relationship built, even like with my mom. It's like all very surface level, right? So like it almost felt like emotional neglect. Like we were in the same house, but like you never really got to know me or like talk to me on a deeper level, right? And I think it's like emotionally immature parents. There's a really good book, Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. It's not like they're just doing what they knew how. So I think that the trauma was not knowing how to regulate myself mentally and emotionally. Emotions were really intense and overwhelming. Even though I was like always kind of stoic, like I didn't know how to process it. I didn't know how to make sense of it. I hadn't learned mindfulness. I hadn't learned the three layers of reality, you know, consciousness, mind, body, what feelings and emotions are. And then you have that trauma of like losing your father. And so not having like a male like role model, although I had different people come in who I was really grateful, you know, to support me and stuff like Sean and stuff like that. But I think those traumas were deeply rooted in a lack of self-confidence and a lack of self-esteem. I think there's a lack of self-worth. It was like, okay, well, you know, if I'm not getting this connection at home and these people are the ones that are supposed to like be caring about me, like I must not be valuable. I must not be good enough. I must not be worthy. Um, so I think that's a big one. And I think that ripples across space. And I think for a lot of people, when I got into coaching, I was working with business owners, guys making 10 to 50K a month who wanted to scale their business. And we were working on mindset and performance. And I was leading retreats and stuff. And like, dude, when you get guys or people in general and they get super raw, super vulnerable, super authentic, it usually comes back down to I'm not good enough. Right. Because of family trauma, your parents are denying or rejecting your emotions. They can't be there for you everybody experiences trauma. It's just part of the game, right? So I think it was confidence, self-esteem, belief in myself. And then really, I think it all comes down to, and why I feel like the work I'm doing is so important and why the angle I'm taking in the addiction and sobriety space is different, is that like, dude, part of human evolution, part of the evolving of your consciousness is learning the human operating system. Like one of the things that has always been so fascinating to me that would just blow my mind is like, dude, we're inhabiting this super complex quantum supercomputer. But if you were to ask somebody, go up to 100 random people and say, tell me a little bit about how your brain works. Tell me a little bit about how your nervous system works. Tell me what a feeling is. Can you define an emotion? Can you tell me a little bit about how the mind works? You know, people would look at you like you're speaking another language. And so like learning the human operating system, learning a little bit about the brain, learning a little bit about how the mind works, the predictable patterns and programming of the mind, how you become who you are, how your personality is formed, the architecture of all these things, the process, the developmental stages, what feelings and emotions are, mindfulness. Like what it does is it expands your map of reality, right? And once that begins to expand, then you can begin to make sense of everything. You get to make sense of why I'm feeling this way, why I'm thinking this way, why my tendencies are this way, why my personality tendencies happen to be this way as opposed to that way. Like everything just starts to make sense. And so that was a major piece. And it's like once you begin to understand this map, then you can look back at yourself and be like, okay, these are the components and parts of the machine that I want to tweak or delete or upgrade or optimize or augment. And then it just comes into doing the work, right? That's like the inner work that we all talk about.
I love that you bring that up because that's exactly how I see things as well. And one of the things that I feel like we won't go too deep in this, but because they don't teach psychology, emotions, your physiology, spirituality, not in a religious standpoint, but like understanding energy and all that stuff at a younger age, we as we're adults, like this stuff just doesn't. This is like that 1% who understands it. But like if more people knew about how their brains work, how their emotions work, how their patterns work, how their beliefs work, it's almost like I attribute it to if you were to lay down your entire framework of a human being from your talents to your gifts to all of the patterns that you've acquired growing up as a child. And not to say that those patterns weren't instilled for a reason, to teach you, to help you grow, help your soul grow. Like the invalidation, I totally resonate with that. For my entire life, I sought out validation. It manifested in different ways. I always had to be heard. I always had to be the loud person, or accepted, or whatever the case may be. But now realizing that it was, that was my trauma, was not feeling understood and validated for my gifts, and seeing the world differently. I was programmed to want to believe that the world was this way, but my mind was always at a dissonance. I had this cognitive dissonance with what my parents were telling me to do with my life versus how I truly felt, and they only saw it one way. And so anytime that there was conflict, it was always like, what the hell's going on? Like, why aren't they supporting me? Why don't they love me? Why don't they see what I see and give me that space to make my own mistakes without guilt tripping me? And, what it does, it reroutes you on your path. Because if you can come to terms with your gifts, your flaws, all of those things from an early age, from my personal perspective, you can tap into your authentic self at a much earlier point in your life, and then start making the impact, because everybody's voice is completely unique. And I think it took me, I would say, even till this year to get to where I'm at, like understanding fundamentally, like what were the pattern blocks, what were the belief patterns that were blocking me from actually reaching my highest potential. And a lot of the times we just blame, we just blame external, we blame them, we blame this, we blame that, without actually reversing the fucking mirror, looking at ourselves and be like, okay, well, what's wrong with me? You can't change that. You can't change him. Even your closest person that you can't change anybody but yourself. And that was like, oh, it's so hard. It's so easy to blame, and it's so hard to change,
Yeah, right. Oh. Yeah, that's such a powerful point, man. And I love how you bring it back to like your authentic self, because that's the game, right? Like the entire evolutionary process I look at is, how can we continue to remove the things that are not our authentic self, all the old patterns and programs and defense mechanisms and strategies that we use to shy away from pain, and all the masks that we put on and everything else, right? And all the substances that we abuse and things that we look for outside of ourselves to try to change or augment the way that we feel inside. How can we strip all of that away and tap back into our personal truth, our most authentic self? Like, that is the game. That's what overcoming an addiction is waking up mentally, emotionally, spiritually, progressing, evolving your consciousness to realize, and like, you never needed the alcohol, right? The alcohol was a symptom. It was a strategy that you were using, right? Like in NLP, there's like, like this strategy called chunking, where it's like, okay, when somebody drinks, like, even though they're destroying their life and they know it, and they're ruining their family and inducing trauma into their kids and like all these things that are like fucked up, like, they're still drinking with a good intention, right? And that good intention is to feel a sense of safety, to feel a sense of connection, to feel maybe a sense of love, right? And like, all those things reside inside you, right? They
already exist. Yeah.
Like what I'm sure you've discovered in meditation, because I know you've been meditating for a long time. Like, as I look back on my journey, the one thing that has had the greatest asymmetric upside return is just consistent meditation. Like, it changes the fabric of who you are. And what I discovered through that process and journey is that I am the source. I am the factory. I am the spring from which all experience of reality is produced. We're trained in this materialistic, physical model of reality through media and music and television and everything else, that like, you have to constantly acquire something outside of you. And so it keeps people on this constant chase, never looking at what's going on inside of them, always searching and trying to grab something outside of them, whether it's alcohol or porn or something else, external validation. But once you can like clear the water and come back home to yourself, and you remove all that nonsense, and you allow your unique energetic fingerprint, your unique energetic expression. Like you said, nobody has the same voice as you. Nobody synthesizes reality the same way that you do. Nobody communicates in the way that you do. Nobody understands the model of the world in the way that you do.
Right.
And once you can tap into that and you have a growth mindset and you're doing the work, like, man, you just become such a profoundly powerful beacon of light to
Right.
then inspire and motivate and lead others back home to their authentic self.
God, dude, that was so good. Sorry, my nipples got hard. Every time
Mine are hard
so
too.
anytime wisdom like that gets dropped, nipples start perking up. That was it. I like that you brought up circling you back to your authentic self, and you are a beacon of light. And I think that is what progression is, evolution is. That's how we are going to evolve as a species to become higher dimensional beings, to get new technologies, to get access to much higher wisdom, is if we stop looking outward and start working inward. And I think it's a hard thing to swallow for a lot of people, especially if it's all brand new. So, it's like tip of the iceberg stuff, but it's painful work. It's not easy. I mean, I'm not going to go into details, but I just had a really like serious, very like, my marriage almost collapsed the other day. And it was because I was not being authentic to myself, to my partner. And I had been holding on to a lot of guilt and shame, secrets and lies that I could not fully admit to myself, let alone the person, the love of my life. And so that manifested in so much trauma and resentment and anger towards, my partner. And when we had this conflict, it came out, and I was able to express 100%. Like, obviously we had fought, and it was like at this point I was like, I just need to say what I need to say. And the moment I released that, it was so cathartic. Like, we hold on to this shit,
Yeah.
and that's the pain that we're holding on. And once we let
Emotional
that go,
emotional constipation is what my coach calls it.
it really is, man. Oh my God. If you can just be truthful with yourself and not like, yeah, it was, it's almost like you have this bar of authenticity, this meter. If you're being 100% authentic, like everything you say, you touch, you feel just turns to gold. But when you're limiting yourself by not being honest and authentic to yourself and truthful to yourself and the people around you, and you're trying to be someone else's identity and adopt someone else's values that aren't truly yourself, you shut off your authenticity to like 20%. And you wonder why you're not, reaching the people that you want to reach, and you're not making an impact in your business or whoever you're communicating to, because you're not being who you really are. And that took me a long time to learn. I'm like, I need to talk this way about this stuff to that person, but I really want to talk to this person about that because that's how I really am. But everyone sees me as this. And I'm just like, fuck that, dude. I'm just going to fucking talk the way I normally talk at home to my friends because that's who I am.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the thing, man, is like, yeah, accepting yourself fully, man. That was a big one. When going back to the traumas, it's like there's always, similar to you, man, like, oh, there's something wrong with me. I'm different. Nobody thinks the way I do. The topic of conversations and the way that like I communicate and synthesize life, everyone I talk to doesn't really seem to be doing that.
Yeah.
And so like maybe something's wrong. There was like embarrassment, like, and so, man, I would say one of the things that really like a defining moment for me was, I think I was around 8 or 9 months sober, and I started doing these ice baths, and I started doing ice baths like 3-4 days a week with my buddies. And I went on Instagram one day, and I hadn't really posted on social media, and I made this 10-minute video about like ice baths and doing hard shit and why doing hard shit is good for you and moving outside of your comfort zone. And some people will look at you and say, you're fucking crazy. I can never do that. Other people will like, support you. But I was talking about the philosophy of intentionally putting yourself in a state of discomfort so that you can expand your pain tolerance and that, so you can grow. And I got so much positive feedback from that. And like, dude, I was so scared to put that video out. I was shaking. I was fucking nervous. There was so much anxiety because I was like, I set up my phone right here. I was sitting right here and I just started talking. And I hadn't really done that before, but something called me to do that. And I got so much positive feedback. And what that did, and this is like exposure therapy, people who are anxious and fearful about things in life, this is how you do it. You expose yourself to the thing that you think is so scary and anxiety provoking. And what happens is you get either neutral or positive feedback into your five senses to say, hey, this thing is actually safe. This thing that you're so afraid of, right? And that relaxed my nervous system. And I was like, oh, okay. So this camera, me talking into it, it's not this fucking terrifying thing. Let me do it again. And it gets easier and easier and easier. And through that process, like, dude, there's profound things that happen.
Wow.
But it comes back down to accepting yourself and then embracing yourself, right? Like getting to the point where it's like, not only do I accept myself, but like I fucking love myself. Like I buy into my own thing and into my own shit. Like you look back and then you start being super consistent with your habits and behaviors, and then your integrity increases and your confidence increases and your self-esteem increases, and it becomes this snowball effect, and other people are giving you positive feedback and you're like, okay, we're on the right track here. And the entire time you're aligned. Like, damn, I'm just being myself. I'm just sharing. I'm like, I'm not putting on masks. I'm not putting on a front. I'm not fucking flexing nonsense. Like, I'm sharing the deepest truths that live inside me about the human experience. And it's
Amen.
like, wow, like it just makes sense. It feels aligned.
Amen, bro. That's so beautiful. I love that so much, and I remember back in the day, and I'll leave it at this. When we would get drunk and hang out and talk, we would just talk about all of this stuff, but drunk, thinking that, and it wouldn't leave us ever. And the fact that you have stood up with all that fear and anxiety, but took a stand and expressed yourself authentically, for me, who experienced the same type of fear of judgment, is very inspiring. So, congrats, bro.
Thank you, brother. Dude, it was terrifying, man. I was shaking in my fucking boots. But
Yeah.
it gets easier. Exposure therapy, right? Like your nervous system relaxes. You discover there's full safety in being who you are. The universe is here to support you,
Right.
right? Like and that's like a meta pattern, right? Like a presupposition in a way. It's like the universe isn't out to fuck me. The
No.
universe isn't here to ruin my life. Yeah, I've had trauma. Yeah, I've had pain. Yeah, I've had challenges and roadblocks and obstacles, but it's like having a deep underlying belief that the universe wants a life for you that is more beautiful and incredible than you can begin to imagine.
Right.
If only you're willing to dig deep into yourself and express the deepest aspects of your truth. And sure, there's going to be fear. Sure, there's going to be anxiety, but you will know when you feel that alignment. And I think following your alignment, following your intuition is the game. Like there is an intelligence that lives inside of us that is more profound than we can begin to explain.
Right.
And it's like I had this one experience on psychedelics where it felt like I was in the presence of God. And it was I could sit here and talk about it for 30 minutes, but one of the downloads that I received in that moment was like, dude, you're just along for the ride. Like you're sitting on a train that's already moving 1,000 miles an hour, and like your conscious mind is the last one to like catch on. Like there's something going here.
Yeah.
And as long as you can tap into your personal truth, your alignment, like
It becomes
there's something
effortless.
there.
Whatever's
Yeah.
effortless for you is what you're meant to do, what's aligned for you. But to tap into that takes a fuck ton of courage. I think courage has been my theme for this year. It's been 30 days, but courage and facing pain, like just putting myself in uncomfortable situations. The fear does not subside by thinking it through. You have to just face it. You just have to do it. I was fearful of Twitter, and then I got onto Twitter, and it was like, I was like, oh my god, those are my people right there. Like they're sitting right here, and I had no idea. But it was like, I feel like that stress response, that anxiety, that fear is always a good signal. If you're like,
Yeah.
ooh, there's something there. All right, let's
Yeah.
just go straight into it. Fuck it, you know.
That's
And
it, dude. It is a signal. It is a
Yeah.
signal. Like if you have a growth mindset, you should pay very close attention to what is going on inside you. And the things that you're anxious about and that you're fearful towards are the signal. It's the compass saying, hey, go towards that. It's like a self-guided system. You just have to quiet the mind enough and pay and begin to understand and build a good enough relationship to it to be in tune with its nuances, your
Right.
gut,
All of it.
certain feelings, a little into like
Energy
it
boost,
already
or yeah.
knows. It
It
already
is.
knows.
And that's what I feel like needs to be mapped out for the human race, is understanding how to navigate your own internal guiding system, which is your emotions. Because it's like anxiety, fear, they say it's like, oh, it's bad, but it's like, no, it's good. Go fucking face it. Go. All right, brother. I'm gonna wrap up there, but it was an absolute blast. I think there's been incredible knowledge, wisdom, nuggets drop. Oh my god, it's been my soul is just jumping right now. It's jacked up.
That's a
Thank you
brother.
for the inspiration, bro. All right, I'm gonna end the call there, but thank you so much for watching this. Thank you for listening, and we love you.